You're listening to today's inspirational message on the Proverbs with Kurt Bjorklund.
Have you ever known somebody who appears to flaunt the ways of God, the wisdom of Scripture, even common decorum, even if you don't consider it to be a biblical value, and yet they seem to succeed, seem to get ahead, and you have that moment where you ask the question, is it really worth it to pursue God, to try to do things the right way, the honorable way? If you haven't asked that question, it's a question that has been asked in Scripture. And here's what we read, verses 5, 6, and 7 of Proverbs 21. Again, this week we're looking at some of the attitudes that are destructive to us personally. And this, you could say, is the attitude that it doesn't matter. What I do doesn't matter. Here's what we read. The plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty. We talked about diligence yesterday, but this idea of gain that we get hastily, saying it won't last. So if it's always a rush to get ahead without concern for process, it's saying that is something that may appear to work, but it doesn't ultimately work. The getting of treasures by a lying tongue is a fleeting vapor and a snare of death, trying to gain when it requires us to cut corners, to be deceitful, to lie. And then verse 7, the violence of the wicked will sweep them away because they refuse to do what is just. And the word violence here is plunder. So the plunder of the wicked will sweep them away. And that could be plunder, could be, that's Robert Alter's translation, violence. But either way, what that's talking about is a forcefulness. And so what you have, just really quickly here, is a couple different approaches, 3 different approaches to how we think we can maybe get ahead. And then saying, well, is that really true? I've seen people who seem to get ahead by doing it forcefully, deceitfully, or hastily. Is this true? And here's what we read in chapter 21, verse 12. The righteous one observes the house of the wicked. He throws the wicked down to ruin. Verse 15, when justice is done, it's a joy to the righteous, but terror to evildoers. We often wrongly assume that what we see today is the way that things are, and that the results that we see today are fixed. And this can be frustrating to those who acknowledge or prioritize God in any way, and we see people who don't seem to honor God that get ahead, and those who seem to honor God who struggle. But the righteous one here brings about a stunning reversal, and many things will be turned upside down. And it's good to remember when you say, is it worth it to do the right thing, to act in the right way, that God acts in ways that aren't always obvious and aren't always immediate. Sometimes we don't know how God will work. And this is a word of comfort when we're on the right side of things. The righteous one could refer to the person who's personally righteous, or to God as the ultimate righteous one. I think this is probably a reference to God, meaning that there's a comfort when people who ignore justice and practice oppression seem safely situated in luxury. There's a comfort in knowing that God sees and God is not inept to deal with what's wrong. And what's important here is that we don't fall into the thinking that says this person will get away with it. And they may in this life, but not ultimately. The week that I studied this proverb before I produced this recording, there was a Hollywood producer, well known, who systematically used his position to take advantage of women and was found guilty on multiple counts of wrongdoing. His acts were evil. You don't have to be a Christian to think they were evil. And they were well known long before the verdict. And for years he appeared to have a house of luxury. But we know that God sees and will not let wrong go. We may not always see the trial toward the end of someone's life, but there will be a day of reckoning before God, and he will throw down the house to ruin, their house to ruin. And then there is a word of terror when we're on the wrong side of things. As comforting as it is to know that God will deal with wickedness and evildoers, these are words in Hebrew that could refer to all of us in some ways. It's terrifying because there are times when we fit in these categories. And there's a day coming when wrongs will be righted. And only fleeing to the work of Jesus Christ, who took on evil and wickedness on behalf of those who come to Jesus Christ, is ultimately sufficient to escape this coming terror. Without turning to Jesus, there can only be terror that awaits. Jesus endured having his life torn apart so that those who come to him would have the grace given to them to not get what they deserve. And this perspective alone will give us the long-term capacity to choose more often the path of justice. So today, will you recognize where you're on the wrong side of justice and turn to Jesus for grace and embrace him as a way of life?
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.